Welcome back to the Strategic Veteran Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we have the honor of speaking with George Emerson Hayworth, a dedicated leader and coach whose journey from military service to entrepreneurship embodies the core values of resilience, leadership, and personal transformation. George served 4.5 years on active duty as a field artillery officer in the Army, where he deployed to Afghanistan and gained a wealth of experience that shaped him into the leader that he is today. His commitment to service didn't end with his active duty. He continues to serve as an engineer officer in the Tennessee Army National Guard, achieving the rank of major later this year. George is the founder of Elite Sentinel Coaching, where he focuses on forging leaders and building legacies by helping men reclaim their ability to lead, and love their families. He's also the co-host of the Present Fathers podcast, a platform dedicated to empowering men to become better leaders in their homes and communities. Through his work, George is on a mission to create generational change by training men in authentic masculinity and leadership, using the lessons he's learned from his military experience, corporate career, and personal journey of healing. So let's dive in and warmly welcome George Emerson Hayworth, a true embodiment of what it means to be a strategic veteran, dedicated to forging a better future for himself and others. George, welcome to the show, brother.
I appreciate it, man. I feel so official. You're using the middle name in there too. So
that's how it came through to me. So I just kind of take it as it is. But dude, you're doing a lot
about that because, I wonder like what my parents were thinking. They're like, we're going to name this tiny little baby George Emerson Hayworth, like we're some British royalty or something. I'm like, my dad was a window cleaner. So, it's kind of funny.
It is, man. And like George is like an old name, right?
It's funny because I'm named after both of my great grandfathers, hence the really old sounding name. Like I think George is the most popular name in like 1903 or something, and never again. So here we are.
It makes sense. I have an uncle that's also a George. He's a Vietnam guy, so he was born, I think, in the late 40s. So I just associate that name with being kind of an older name. Dude, let's just jump right in. Like, what inspired you to join the Army? Like, what was it for you about the Army that was like, yep, I'm doing this?
Yeah, it's two things. One, I was always like really enamored with the military. Even as a kid, you'd go to like the county fair, and of course there's like, they have like Humvees out there and 50 cals and all that kind of stuff. So I was always like, okay, military's pretty awesome. I was obsessed with like all the war movies and stuff growing up. So that always like, appealed to me. As I grew up, got a little bit older, high school age and everything, I was like, I think I really want to serve my country. Obviously 9/11 played a huge factor in that. I think it was in 7th grade when 9/11 happened. So pretty formative in my, growing up, country at war now. And I definitely wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself. I joined for all the idealistic reasons. Like I want to serve my country, do the right thing, be patriotic. So that was like reason number one. But now on the other end of this, like as a grown man with my own family who now like helps other men kind of master their own identity. If I'm really honest with myself, I think about 49% of my motivation to join the Army was to prove myself as a man. Because I was insecure, I was scared, I had all these, issues from my childhood, and that was kind of my thought. Oh, I'll fix myself through that. Didn't really work. That's not how that works. But that was definitely, in my, teenage young man mind, that was the way that I sought to prove myself as a man. And so I'm sure we'll get into that. But that actually set me up for a lot of crisis as kind of mid to late 20s. When the Army wasn't enough anymore, right? I was trying to fill a deep hole inside of me with the Army, and it was never going to fill it. So, yeah.
That's so true, man, because I was 30 when I was medically retired. And you constantly trying to fill that hole. I took 8.5 years to figure out how to fill that hole and whatnot. And I like that you pointed out, you did it for all the patriotic reasons or whatever, this serving something bigger than yourself. Ultimately, I think that's why we all did it. We all have a myriad of excuses as to why we did it, but it really comes down to there really is nothing more fulfilling than serving something bigger than you, right?
Yeah. I mean, because men need purpose, right? I think we're designed to want to accomplish something with our lives, right? And especially as a younger man too, that desire to prove yourself is a good thing. Like I don't want to twist, my personal experience and downplay the young masculine desire to kind of prove yourself in the world. You're supposed to do that, but it needs to be in a healthy balance, right? You're not doing it to then have all your identity wrapped into one thing. It's because it's just what you're supposed to do as a man, right? And the Army ticks a lot of those boxes for young men, right? It's brotherhood, it's purpose, it's mission, it's values, it's a challenge. So there's a lot of good things in the military. So when I talk about my personal experience, that's not the Army's fault. That was George's fault, having bad perceptions about how to actually become a man. In a lot of ways, I'm immensely grateful to the Army because, quite frankly, I don't think I'd be standing here today able to do what I'm doing if it wasn't for the Army. So I just want that to be very clear for those out there. I'm not jaded against the military. I still serve in a part-time capacity, and I'm really proud of what I've done and who I've met and served with. I just think young men today need to learn more ahead of time on what really makes a man, because I think probably you and me have very similar experiences in that we probably didn't really get taught that very well. And so we've been looking for all these things to kind of fill that gap, and they were never going to do it anyway. So I just wanted that to be clear.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm glad that you clear that up, because I feel the same way. Like, there's a lot of things I'm mad at the Army for, the taking advantage of kind of our stereotypical upbringings, right? Like, I grew up in a broken home. I was bullied. Some trauma stuff that went on there, right? Like, for me, it was very much a way out of small town America to travel and see stuff that I probably wouldn't have ever had a chance at seeing, because I would have fallen into the meth crap that goes on in Southern Indiana, right? But you speaking to that, like, I am immensely grateful for the things that, the Army shaped me into today. And I, like you, wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you if it wasn't for the Army. So it's really cool that you put that together. In the little questionnaire that you filled out before you came on the show, you mentioned failing Ranger School was a pivotal moment for you. So how did that experience influence your approach to leadership and personal growth? And I'm sure it really affects what you do with Elite Sentinel Coaching now. I'm sure you learned a ton of lessons in that. I early in my career, I was supposed to be, on the track to Ranger Regiment. I was 11 X-ray Airborne Ranger, kind of in my contract. That never executed, so I was pretty jaded. Ended up being really young going to selection. Was a 21-day non-select, right? Like, learned a lot of lessons in that. And so I can relate to what you're talking about with Ranger School, but obviously, in your own words, what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so I actually think that was one of the best things that's ever happened to me, which sounds very counterintuitive, right? Failing this prestigious school that earns you a lot of respect and kind of proves you're a little bit a cut above the rest, right? Failing that was actually the best thing to happen to me early in my career. And so I like to use this example because this isn't just a military thing. It's any young man setting out, and you've worked really hard for something and it doesn't come to fruition. We now have a choice. It's either going to define us and shatter us, or we're going to learn something from it and like carry on, right? And I think that's really what a huge part of being a man is getting back up to the next rep and learning how to own your failures and not like be embarrassed by them, but just make it a part of who you are. So with all that, in the most stereotypical fashion, Second Lieutenant Hayworth double no-goed the land nav at Ranger School out week number 1, right? So yeah, I became the meme, and the real reason it felt so shattering was not just that I failed. It's because, I came straight from Bullock, as field artillery basic school, en route, go to Ranger School. And then I was supposed to join the 101st. And oh, by the way, we're deploying in like 3 months. Right. So, the S1 and everything, they're all tracking where I'm at now. They know I'm there. And then, now I'm magically at Fort Campbell a lot sooner than I'm supposed to be. So like everyone knew immediately, like, oh, okay, he's a washout. Right. In my mind, I thought my career was over. Oh, he's going to be the failure. The whole unit just deployed like 11 months prior, and we were already going right back to the same footprint. So there was like everyone has a combat patch. Everyone had been to war at this point. So like basically the only people who don't have any real experience is like the brand new second lieutenants or like kids straight from basic. And that was like maybe 10% of the unit. So it was a huge embarrassment. And for a while it did crush me mentally. It was the first time I really failed something real big that I had really set my mind to and really wanted. But again, back to that, wounded little teenage George, I wanted it for the wrong reasons. I wanted it, I said all the reasons I wanted it was to prove to my future soldiers that I'm willing to work hard and do the right things for them and be a good leader and all that kind of stuff. But deep down, I wanted to say I was a Ranger, right? To have the tab and to have the showboat, behavior and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's why it's the best thing that ever happened to me, is because it taught me a massive, dose of humility that I needed. And because I didn't have a Ranger tab, now I had to work extra hard for everything to prove myself. And so through that, on the military side of the house, it made me work very hard, and I performed very well. I was a top performer, rated, above my peers consistently, and all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of it was because I failed. I knew I had to prove myself, and I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder from a performance point of view. But as a young man point of view, the lesson I took from that was, as I got a little bit more comfortable with admitting to people that I had failed Ranger school, and I'd have like infantry buddies and stuff be like, dude, you're squared away. How do you not have a tab? And I'm like, I failed straight up, man. I wasn't good enough, so that's why I work hard now to be as good as I can be. And they were like, respect. And I realized that, okay, look, people are going to judge you by what you actually do, who you actually are today, not what you used to be. And I think that is something that young men need to get comfortable with, is fail early, fail often, and learn rapidly. Because whatever you set your mind to, whether it's the military, sports, business, getting married, you're going to have lots of failures, lots of mistakes. And it's how you respond to them that ultimately will define you. And so I like to share that specific example, especially with veterans, because everyone knows what it is. No one likes to say they failed the school or whatever, but how you respond to it is ultimately what's going to define you. And for me, it made me a lot more humble. It taught me a lot of work ethic, and to just really prove myself through my actions, not, accolades.
Well, I think early on too, right? Like knowing, I was an infantryman, so every lieutenant, to progress has to have a Ranger tab. And, even for us enlisted guys, for a long time, you had to have a Ranger tab to pin 7. Like you weren't going to make 7 without a tab. Now, obviously, with the number of combat deployments that we were getting in the op tempo, right? All of that changed. But I love that you're speaking to, the experience of failing that early in your career, right? Because you're carrying that with you. You think, okay, my career's over because I didn't get a tab. Probably in a time where I don't know how it is in the artillery, but Ranger tab goes a long way towards, even if you're not such a great leader, it really does pad that NCOER, OER, right? And so you got to learn that lesson in failure, which built your resilience pretty quick. You know what I mean? And I think that's awesome, because we're all afraid to fail. And what I've figured out since I've been out and started this journey of building the company, working in the nonprofit, all that good stuff, is I kind of welcome failure at this point, because it's the only way I'm going to learn the lessons I need to learn in order to progress further forward, And so I love that you're talking about, those lessons and learning those lessons. You did a deployment to Afghanistan, correct? And you were part of the SFAT team. And I'm really curious about this. Where were you? Because we were in the country at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, I was in Kunar. Fob Joyce was where I operated out of.
Okay, I was in Kandahar province out in the Horn.
Okay, yeah, so you were RC South. I was RC East. Yeah. Yeah, kind of small world though.
It is, man, and I've not talked to anybody other than just guys that were on the deployments with me. I haven't actually met somebody that was kind of in the same AO I was, but and I got a lot of deployments, man. I did 4, so I did 3 in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. Yeah, and it's always cool to talk to other guys that were in the country at the same time. So what was going on in RC East while you were there?
It was pretty tame, actually. This was the period where all the rumor mill had started. Our OPSEC cracks me up. They'll tell us to not say anything, and then the division Facebook page is talking about troop movements and everything. But to that point, the enemy knew we were getting ready to kind of wind things down. Right. This is 2012 to 13. We've switched from doing kinetic, company size movements to try and take terrain from the Taliban, to transitioning to purely an advisory role, and trying to get the ANA and all the different, Afghan police and everything, to kind of take over the reins. Right. So I think the enemy figured out pretty quick, we don't need to waste our time with the Americans. They're leaving anyway. Let's just kill the Afghans. So for us, it was actually kind of boring. I saw a little bit of combat, got shot out a few times, all that kind of stuff, but nothing to the level of my same unit, the previous deployment, 1 year apart. I mean, they made a movie about it called The Hornet's Nest. Okay. They basically showed up, and it was every day, changing mags, cause you're expending that much ammo, So that was not my experience at all. That's kind of what I was expecting because I'd done my research, knowing, hey, I'm going to the 101st, 1st Brigade. This is where we're going. Kind of did some research, like, holy crap, there's like 7 medals of honor that have been awarded from this one valley. Okay, probably not a great place I'm going to. I better like prep. So I like mentally was expecting that, and it kind of wasn't, which in a lot of ways I was spared, right? I was spared probably a lot of things I didn't want to experience.
I promise you were, because
Yeah, right.
in RC
so like
South,
I don't want to, I
awful.
never want to represent myself as like, oh, I'm some, hard ass like war hero or whatever. I'm not. Okay. I saw enough to understand it and have a respect for those who have like really been through a lot. And I have tons of friends who went through way more than me. I mean, shoot, all the guys on my team had deployed 3 or 4 times. So, I was the newbie. I just shut up and colored and all that kind of stuff. But that team was an amazing experience. So failing Ranger School, now I deploy within like 3 months with these guys. And the team structure was loosely based on like a SFODA, where it's about a 14-man team. It's very rank heavy, and everyone kind of has to do everything. So I was like the team S1, the terp manager, the patrol leader sometimes, a 240 gunner at times, a Mark 19 gunner at times. Like I was like all the things. And so as a young lieutenant, that was just an incredible experience because I got to see every role. I got to gain mastery over all these different tasks and skills. And like when we came home, I was more experienced as a 240 gunner than most of my soldiers, so it was awesome because it empowered me as a leader a lot to have a lot of real experience. And beyond just the Army side of it, I learned so much about like being a man, right? Because these were tough guys who, depending on their branch, didn't really matter. They'd all deployed 3 or 4 times. I learned a lot, just breathing and being with these guys all the time, and having to interface with the Afghans. And, like that was our job, was to go meet with the Afghan police like every single day and advise them and learn a new culture. So it was a really rewarding experience for me. And so I'm actually pretty grateful that, I was spared a lot of the kinetic side of the house, because I think I learned a lot of really valuable lessons that have served me way beyond the military that, a gunfight isn't going to teach me necessarily. So
it's weird to see the dynamics. So you were pretty bored up there in RC East. We were in the country at the same time. I'm in RC South out in the Horn, and we're getting hammered, man. I mean, that was, for me, I don't know. I did so many deployments so close together that they all start to bleed together. But the Afghanistan deployment for me was my 4th deployment, and it just stands out in my mind so much more than the other ones because it was just a constant fight. It was a constant fight. We were constantly killing dudes. We constantly had dudes getting hurt, and so when you speak to that, and you experienced some things, but you didn't experience on the same level, but you experienced enough to understand, right? Like you didn't need to experience the full gamut of it to understand. Like it sucks, man. But also like being on that SFAT team and getting to develop all of those skills, man, what an awesome opportunity. Because for me, that deployment, I ended up in the training room because I had gotten hurt. And then, I was the TOC NCOIC, and I was pretty bitter about it, right? Like I'm going to be a fucking fobbit. And,
I know, yeah.
Right. But what I ended up learning was, man, if you really just lean into that role, shit, dude, I learned so much that bettered me for the rest of my career. I learned to see the bigger picture of, now you're not just worried about squad and platoon movements, but you're worried about battalion and brigade movements, and tracking all of that and seeing how all the assets work together. It was just like you said, like a humbling experience. Like, man, I really should have had a way more open mind about this experience.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that, because like when I got, I'm an artillery officer. I want to go be a fire support officer attached to an infantry company and call in airstrikes, because in the previous deployment, that's like all they were doing. The physos and FOs were busy, and I was like, yeah, dude, that's what I want to do. That's like the peak experience as an artilleryman, and so when I didn't get assigned to that, and I was like assigned to an SFAT team, I was like, oh, it's just so gay, like this is so weak, I'm going to be like some rear in the gear, all that kind of stuff. And I couldn't have been more wrong, man, because I actually still got to be an FSO, because I was the only FA qualified lieutenant on the FOB. So whenever the infantry needed an FSO, guess who was it? So I got to do all the things, and then to your point too, having to coordinate with battalion and then other AOs, because we'd be traveling a long way and you're having to make all these coordinations and air support and shifting fires and all this kind of stuff and troop movements and frontline trace. And like, as a young lieutenant, I was like, holy cow, like I saw the war like from above,
right.
And like I had to learn really fast. And those lessons stuck. Like, we did this huge operation where we like air assaulted in, we moved like multiple companies in to like take terrain. And then the Afghan army was going with us and all this kind of stuff. And, just going through the rehearsals for that, the execution lists and everything with all the pro words, for those who aren't aware, you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down and they're like, Irene, Irene, Irene. Well, you do that for like 1,000 lines of things that are going to happen, right? So like every pro word means something to everyone. And like fast forward now almost a decade going through like courses in the National Guard to like, progress in my career there. I'm like the only one in the room with all these other captains and stuff who have ever seen something like that. So they're all struggling with conceptually how to do this. And I kind of break it down for them. So like those lessons have still continued to pay themselves forward. And what I extracted beyond the military is wherever you are in your life listening to this, whatever experience you're going through right now, take whatever lesson you can possibly extract out of it, even if it's a crappy situation, and like hang on to that forever, because that is going to be a tool that you can pull out over and over and over the rest of your life and teach it to other people. And I think that's one of the biggest things that men need to do is this attitude of like, oh, well, future generations, they're just so weak or whatever. It's like, well, no, train them then. Pay it forward, bro. Like, don't just sit on your heap of experience. Help others who are actually wanting to learn.
So true, man. I love that. We're going to move into you transitioning out of active duty. What was the decision for you? 4.5 years is not a long time. I think that's pretty awesome that you made captain that quick. That's pretty spot on, right, for making captain, especially with no tab.
I was like the first generation where they bumped it up to about a 4-year timeline, because I think during like the surge years it was like 36 months.
Yeah, it was quick.
Yeah, so for me it was like almost exactly 4 years, and I picked up captain. So I was like a captain for about 6 months before I left.
So why did you decide to leave?
It was not an easy decision. It was almost split down the middle, like 51% get out, 49% stay in. I really loved what I did. A lot. I still miss active duty. There's a lot about it that I miss. But we had given birth, my wife had given birth to our daughter in August of 2015. And so I was still first lieutenant, but I'd been the headquarters XO for almost 2 years at this point. And my wife had a really brutal birth. Like she was in labor for like over 48 hours. It was insane. We had to do a C-section. Like she was hemorrhaging, like all kinds of crazy stuff. So that was really, really, really rough. I was really blindsided by it. Really threw me off, just kind of like, whoa, this is my life now. Nothing went according to plan basically. And then she had really severe postpartum, and out of respect to her, that's her story to tell. I'm not going to go into like all the details, for sure. But it was really, really painful for both of us, like big time. And I had to take like emergency leave and everything. I mean, we were struggling. So it just became very clear to me that like, all right, I love what I do, but this just ain't gonna, like, there's no way I can buy enough time to get stable before I can just like keep being in the Army. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not going to happen. So unfortunately, I think we're just gonna have to go our separate ways here. And that sucked. Like, it really hurt because like, dang, I don't want to give this up, but I didn't really have a choice in my opinion. And my wife was just as fearful about like getting out of the Army because you lose security, right? She's like, well, are you gonna be able to get a job? And are you gonna be able to do all these things? And so we did. The actual mechanism of transitioning wasn't the challenging point. It's that for both of us, both my wife and me, this event of like brutal birth and horrible postpartum basically brought out the worst in both of us, and all of our undealt things from childhood just right to the surface. And so it kind of blew up our marriage. And it's one of the biggest regrets I have in my life is that during this time when my wife needed her husband to be the rock for her, I basically showed up as pissed off, angry 16-year-old version of me who blamed her for everything. And now, I have to get out of the Army because of you, and all this just resentment, victimhood mentality. And yeah, really, really, really bad period in our life. Like, those next 2 years are some of the worst years of my life, maybe the worst years of my life. But I'll kind of pause there because I've got into a lot, but that was ultimately the main reason. And part of that too was like long-term, right? I kind of looked ahead at how much time I'm spending at work, not being with the soldiers in the field, but just doing admin crap because I'm the XO now. And headquarters XO in the artillery is not like the infantry. It's all in the rear with the gear types. It's not like your mortars and snipers and tough dudes. It's like all the peons, Not fun. It's like nothing but headaches, and you never get to the field. And I looked ahead at my career. I was like, man, I'm going to like go to career course. I'll wait for 2 years, then get command for maybe 2 years. Then I'll be back to staff as a major for the next 8 years of my life. And then maybe I'll get a battalion command. I was like, I don't think that's a very good deal for my wife and family for me to be gone this much and only slightly be doing what I like to do. So that was kind of a second piece of it, was just kind of long-term. I don't know if that's a good trade-off.
So do you think all of those 16-year-old George came out because of, in my opinion, for me, the biggest thing that I think we struggle with in the transition is, the military is really good at keeping us in that fixed kind of mindset, like one job, be the best at that job, complete that mission, right? So did you really know who you were as a person coming out of the Army, right? So it's the loss of identity and then that loss of purpose, right? That really kind of threw you back into 16-year-old angry George. I was back to 16-year-old angry Adam when I got out, and I had 13 years in the Army, so like for me, from 17 to 30 years old, all I knew was how to be an infantryman and go to war and come home and go to war and come home, So talk about that. Like, how did you get over losing your identity? How did you go about finding your purpose again to kind of bring yourself back to, that place, that headspace that you should be in to end up moving forward with your life and being successful?
So I think what you just described, where the loss of identity from the Army was definitely a massive contributing factor. And I think this can happen to any man. It's not just a military thing. I think any guy who has, like, you could have been a football player in college, or you could have been this or that or whatever. When you hit that crossroads in your life where this thing that you've worked so hard for is no longer possible to you, like you broke your leg and now you can't do it or whatever, right? A man's going to have to wrestle with that. And if his identity was based off of the thing he did, it doesn't matter what your thing is, like, you're going to struggle very similarly. And this is why, like, men are so the same. We like to think we're different, but we're not. Like, none of us are special butterflies. We're all built the same. We have different personalities, but our core needs are identical. And when it comes to identity, most men today don't know who they are, because our identity, we're conditioned to think it has to come from something external. And it's not until like much later in my life I realized that no. My identity is who I choose to be, what I decide for myself. The programming I'm going to recite in my own mind, it's not the world's. So, like, I'm in the National Guard now, but that's not my identity. It's something I do. And when I do it, I'm all in, and I try and provide as much goodness as I can and be a great leader to those who need it, or just a peer and help, cross-level my knowledge with others, whatever. In my other lines of work, when I'm there, I'm doing them, right? But it's not who I am. It's something I do because we are producers as men. So we should be productive in some way, but it doesn't make us who we really are. Long-winded answer, but getting back to like George personally, I was always looking to prove, I did not have a real identity as a young man. My parents split up when I was 16. It was a really brutal divorce. Without going too far into the weeds, because we'd be here all day, I was subjected to a lot of like emotional manipulation and emotional abuse, kind of got raised by women. So at a period in my life when I should have been really putting on the finishing touches of you're a young man going out into the world, I basically had nothing but confusion and fear. And so everything was projection. I was trying to prove how tough I am, and I burnt a lot of bridges because of that, right? I was just lashing out at the world. So that guy showed back up as soon as this thing that did give me some sense of stability disappeared. And I'd put all my eggs in I'm a combat vet Army officer, and the second that basket was gone, it was like, ooh, I don't really know who I am now. Make matters worse, my wife and I got to a point where we separated for 4 months, and I just totally took a nosedive off the deep end, drinking all the time, surrounding myself with people who like were party friends, not actual friends, who were like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you're like abandoning your wife. Like, this is unacceptable. I didn't have anyone for accountability. I intentionally kind of isolated myself from everyone who'd actually tell me what I needed to hear. And so my spiral just accelerated, right? I was swirling the drain. And I, unfortunately got to the point where I was so messed up, making so many excuses for myself, playing the victim so hard that I started cheating on my wife. So we were still married, and I started having affairs with women. And like, and then I just, one day I woke up and I was like, who the F am I? You know, like, I don't believe in my own behavior. Like if I was an outsider looking in, I'd be judging this person like what a piece of shit, you know? And now I'm like looking at myself, I'm like, this is me now. What the heck? And so again, I know I'm being very long-winded, but I think a lot of guys can relate to this because it's a very deep like struggle. And so I started really getting some real help. Like I'd kind of been going to marriage counseling, but I was like, oh, I need like real counseling now. So I went to this place called Onsite, and that was the first time I really like learned like, ooh, my family of origin stuff is really messing me up today because I haven't dealt with any of it. Like, no wonder it doesn't excuse my behaviors, but it makes sense to me now how I can fix it. And so I just started going into that, like, you know, I know it's cliche now, like extreme ownership. And that took a long time to kind of figure it out on my own, but lots of counseling, lots of therapy, lots of making amends with my wife after my indiscretions, right? Obviously, that almost destroyed us. And so it's still a piece of like, again, failure, right? I got to embrace that. I've failed as a husband for more years than we've been married, right? Most of those years has been in failure. And so I'm still kind of making amends for those things through better action today. But identity has to come from within. And until it starts coming from within, you will never feel fulfilled. You're just going to be chasing the next thing. You'll be on the hamster wheel and you'll never arrive. There is no arriving. That's a myth. I think there's just new levels.
Yep. It's a journey. It's a constant journey.
Yeah. Yep. We're all a work in progress, and you will always be a work in progress until the day you die. It's just how it is.
Yeah. And it's being aware of that and recognizing that you constantly have to keep improving on that to stay on that path and become the person that you're meant to be, or, you know, that resonates with you. I relate to what you just said so much, man. My parents divorced when I was young, 7, you know, largely raised by my mom. You know, she had a hand in keeping us from my dad. So, and then on top of all of that, I was bullied like a lot as a kid, you know, for wearing glasses and having a cross eye and having to patch my eye, right? Like I remember all that shit. And I didn't know how much that actually affected me until I got out of the Army. And like you said, that all comes back and we don't know how to deal with it. So I absolutely relate to what you were saying. And I relate to your next step in this evolution in your transition too, is you got into corporate IT sales. I went into insurance sales as well, which was ultimately the path that led me, you know, to entrepreneurship and founding my own company and all the work that I'm doing today. So how did you land in IT sales? It seems like a lot of us combat arms guys get out and it's like straight to sales. And I don't know if that's actually a good thing or not, because depending on where you land in the sales world, either you're going to get some really shitty advice and it's really going to make you jaded in that industry, or you're going to get some really, really good advice and you're going to go on and be really successful in that industry. So I'm curious to hear how it went for you, because for me, particularly in the insurance world, it was awful. I mean, I started knocking doors selling final expense to the poorest 1/3 of Americans. And in 2020, they didn't even have bank accounts. I was driving these people to the bank to open bank accounts so I could draft premium off of their Social Security checks. I felt like a biggest piece of shit on the planet, but I had to do what I had to do to put food on the table, and I didn't know any better. So I'm interested to see how your sales journey went.
Yeah. So I worked with like a headhunting agency when I was getting out of the Army called Cameron Brooks. And, you know, there's like 20 versions of that, but they work with junior officers getting out to place them in corporate America. And so one of the companies there was Hewlett Packard Enterprise. I interviewed really well. I was one of their top picks. So it was a mutual fit. And the plan was, you know, you're going to shadow like an experienced sales executive for like a year. You're going to be his little coffee getter and hold his briefcase and help him with the reports and everything. And they're going to teach you the ins and outs of the business. You're going to get to meet clients. You're going to like really see how this works. And then we're going to set you up to go like hunt your own accounts. Right. So it's supposed to be this like big training process, which makes a lot of sense, you know, and they wanted to hire military people because they felt like the company was lacking like a strong base of people with like discipline and work ethic and all that kind of stuff. You know, and most of the salespeople were kind of in their 50s by this point. So they're like, well, we can get a bunch of like 30-year-olds, and then that way we'll kind of have a good, strong base for the next generation type of deal. Pretty smart move, honestly, I think. So props to them for like coming up with this initiative. Well, my second day on the job is when they announced that our branch of the company was getting merged out of the company into another company. And so it became like Office Space overnight. Like, what is it you say you do here? So I got zero training pretty much. It was just like thrown into the ocean, figure out how to do corporate IT sales, which is probably one of the hardest type of sales you can do on earth. I mean, like there were days where I just wish I sold a simple product because it'd be like I could tangibly show the client what it is and what it's going to do, as opposed to like these big, complex, business agreement type things. And it was not good. So I really that contributed to my struggle because I was a top performer in the military, and again, I'm relatively average, just to be honest. But of my peer group, I did well. Okay. I was an SF, I wasn't a Ranger, whatever, right? So obviously I'm not trying to say I'm better than I am for those who are listening, right? But where I was a pretty big fish in my small little pond, right? And so it felt good because I felt like a man, like, hey, I know what I'm doing. I have confidence in I can produce results and help others and just be useful. And then I went to the corporate world and I was worthless. Like I didn't know shit, And so it's like I can't sell anything because I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just like trying to not get fired because now we're doing this huge merger. And so I went from being like really good at what I did to like literally the worst, and it's just like, oh my gosh. So mentally that just contributed to my spiral. I eventually kind of figured it out. I stayed at that company. I actually stayed there for 3 years, I think. And then jumped to a competitor and kind of a lot better situation for me. But yeah, I don't wish that on anyone. My corporate experience was about as bad as it could have been. So for those looking to get out, like do that extra level research about like the company culture. Because it would have been fine, I think, if this merger didn't happen, but then it just became dude, like names on lists, like just people not showing up to work the next day. It was wild. I really, it was like the most brutal, corporate axe job where they just like fire swaths of people at a time or whatever they call it. It's not firing, it's workforce reduction or some corporate term. But yeah, it was not good. So definitely don't recommend that for anyone.
And man, I feel like those stories, those really bad forays into the sales world are more common than they need to be, because I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know about chargebacks. I didn't know about, the different arms of the insurance industry, how insurance can be used to do other different things that actually help people and not take money out of their pockets just so you can make a buck. And yeah, I totally relate to that. And so because of that experience, did that start the hamster wheel with starting your coaching business, or had you already been thinking about that?
Eventually. I do want to go back to one point because you asked about like, it seems to be combat arms guys. I do think there's a natural fit, right? And I've noticed this now kind of living active duty, National Guard. And then of my cohort who were hired into the sales world, a lot of us were infantry, or Apache pilots or artillery or Marines, that, kind of a mix of combat arms guys. But then there was also a bunch of like intel analysts and all this kind of stuff. And the guys who were all combat arms branches did okay. Like we all did pretty good. We didn't like stress little details. We didn't sit in analysis paralysis. It's that whole like initiate movement, right? Like that just kind of comes with the territory with any combat arms branch, right? Infantry, artillery, armor, whatever it is, that's kind of just like a necessary evil of being in those branches. Like that's just the way it is. That serves you very well in sales, 100%. Like I think that is a natural fit because that mentality is the ultimate like foundation to have the drive to sell. The guys who were from other branches, man, they really struggled. And like we would almost joke about it. Like me and some of my buddies who were, infantry and stuff, we would be like, man, they really seem to struggle with that. That doesn't seem hard at all, And I do think it was how we were kind of, how we grew up in the Army or whatever. So it's not all bad. I don't want to like make it sound like it's all bad. I think there is a great place for combat arms guys to go into sales. There's a great book that I highly recommend called Integrity Selling for the 21st Century by Ron Willingham. And he goes very good into like the psychology of sales and how, to your point, you could be in an industry that maybe has kind of a negative connotation about how some people abuse the system because they're not really selling, they're extorting, But if you have integrity about how you sell, you can really love what you do and actually provide outcomes for people that do make their life better. And so that's really like what a real salesman is they produce value for a client and then they're compensated according to the value they create. They're not just hawking snake oil. So there is a fit there, but I think you just need to have your eyes wide open, and you need to not be blinded by like how much money you could make, and instead look at like, well, what's the culture like? Because very quickly you'll be forced to compromise your integrity or your values for the sake of a dollar, and you will start to hate yourself. And so let me get to the second question of like, did this start the hamster wheel for me? I was actually pretty content, moved companies, things are going pretty good. Like, hey, I kind of like my job, do all this stuff. And it was, about a year and a half ago, I was, going to represent my company at this big thing and putting my suit on and tie in the morning, and looked at myself in the mirror, and I heard the sentence form, George, this is not the path I have for you. And so I'm a religious guy. I'm not going to like try and push it on anyone. But for me, that was like, oh, okay. All right, God, you got my attention. And it again, identity changed like in a minute. I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, whoa, what am I doing here? Like, who am I? Why am I doing this? This is not aligned with what I believe in. Just like started this whole swirl of like introspection. And I was like, okay, whoa, that was weird. Time to pay attention. And so then I went down the rabbit hole of like, okay, who am I really? What am I really capable of doing? Why am I here on this earth? What is my long-term thing I want to accomplish with my life, with the giftings that I have that I can provide value for? I sought out all kinds of mentors. I tried to find people who'd be like, no, dude, don't do that. You're not skilled at that. You know what I mean? Like basically tell me I was crazy. And I actually got more people like, why aren't you doing this? Like you're definitely suited to that. So I just started taking action, right? There it is, initiate movement. I just initiated movement and started exploring this, figuring out what it would look like. And I realized, okay, with my experience, with my story, with my skills, I am confident that I can help other men compress time. It took me a decade to really learn what it meant to be a man. I can do it for you in 90 days. And that's a great and good thing. And if I can make this work, I can help a lot of people and produce a lot of outcomes. I can provide a lot of value to not just them, but their families too, or their businesses. And it excites me. I love what I'm doing. I love seeing another guy win because I was able to help him. It's like the most rewarding thing I can feel. So that started that journey for me, and that's where I am today. And that was a really long answer, but I feel like the context mattered a lot there. So
no, it's great, man, because I remember being in a hotel room putting on the business casual stuff. I'm not a business casual guy. Like, I had the fade still. The beard was actually trimmed, so it looked, decent. And I'm very much a tank top and Fabletics shorts guy. 90% of my meetings to this day are done in tank top and shorts, like long hair, right? And I heard a similar thing, right? Like I'm spiritual. I don't know whether I call it God or the universe or whatever, but I believe the universe leaves us clues. And I got that clue standing there looking in that full length mirror, like, what the fuck are you doing? This isn't who you are. This isn't, you don't like doing this. Like, so I left and ended up doing what I'm doing now. And I love that you kind of have a similar story, because it speaks to everything that you're doing in your business and teaching people how to follow really their gut and what aligns with them and their core values and their beliefs. Right. And so I'm really curious. This is the fun part for me. Let's talk about Elite Sentinel Coaching. Let's talk about how you landed on men specifically, and also like with the current atmosphere in society with the Me Too movement, and then the toxic masculinity movement and everything else that's going on. It's like, I very much felt like if you pay attention to, social media and media in general and everything that they're talking about, white males in their 30s, like we are public enemy number one. And before I took my trip to Peru and, got the cheat code to really unlock life secrets and shit like that, I was in a pretty dark place because I was attaching myself to all of that shit and like letting that consume me and feeling a certain type of way about that. So first of all, how did you have the balls to step up and say, this is what I'm going to do? And second of all, like, how has that been received, and have you had any pushback?
So the reason I think I was able to, I don't even know if it's courage, quite frankly. It was like, I don't think I had a choice, right? And I felt my God was saying, you better do this or else, was like kind of the way it felt, and I was like, all right, time to execute. And so the reason I've had more confidence about it is it didn't like happen overnight, right? Let's be very clear. It's been a process. I've needed a lot of help to get out of my own way to become where I am today, right? It's a process. But I just started in a little bit of faith, like, okay, I'll start taking steps forward, see what this is, pressure test it, right? And every time I thought something was going to like shut me down, it actually was an opening door. And like people started coming out of the woodwork being like, hey, dude, I want to help you. Like, I see what you're doing. Like, let me help you. And then, I'm just so grateful to all these incredible guys who have like really helped me grow a lot as a leader, as a man. And so it just became kind of a natural shift. Like I got out of my own limiting beliefs of like, well, why me, right? I don't have like a special operations background. Who's going to want to listen to me? Right? I had all these limiting beliefs, like I'm not special enough. And then I realized it doesn't matter. So maybe some people are only attracted to those factors, right? Okay, I'm not their guy. But there will be plenty of guys who are like, okay, this dude can help me. And now I have the proof because I've been doing it long enough. But initially I realized like, okay, I need to get out of my own way. If just logically, let's play this out. If I'm a man of faith and I believe that my God is saying, do this, it's what I've called you to, is he going to let me fail? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so for me, I didn't really need like a ton of convincing necessarily. I just need a little bit of help to kind of push me in the right direction. But now that I'm there, I have the confidence to say these things, talking about like real masculinity and kind of being counterculture, not because I'm some like tough dude or whatever, but just because I love people too much. I love men too much to let them continue to suffer. Like I'm out of the matrix. Like I can see it for what it is essentially. And I feel like I need to help the right people unplug so that they can have the life I'm having now and the like sense of peace inside themselves, their identity again. So for me, it's more about like the mission was so clear to me. The purpose is so clear to me. Like I don't have a choice. Right. And I forget the second part of the question.
No, I like, did you get any pushback? Did you have to deal with the haters coming after
pushback.
you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like some huge name yet, right? So the amount of hate I get is relatively small. There are people who really hate this message, and they love to post about it and stuff. Quite frankly, I ignore them. And what I've also realized too is I'm going to just speak the truth. And if it pisses people off, I don't care, because maybe it pisses 100 people off, but 10 guys will hear it and be like, I can free myself now. I know how to fix my life now. And so I'm finding the seekers. I'm looking for the men who are ready. And they just need the help to like get to the next level. So I've got a wide range of men I work with to this point. Some are like on the brink of divorce. Their life is in total shambles. Other guys are like, man, I'm killing it. I just see that I can get to like the next level. And I feel like you're the guy to take me there. And so we're all somewhere on that spectrum. So I want that to be clear to all the men listening, is like wherever you are, working with someone who can actually get you out of your own way will change your life. Whether you're on the brink of disaster or you're actually doing pretty good, like that's the best time to level up, when you're in a good season of life, because you'll be able to just stack wins on top of wins really fast. For the guys on the brink of disaster, we can certainly, get you out of there, but it's going to be a lot of painful work, and that takes longer, right? Because there's some serious things going on. So it's a spectrum. And I don't care about the haters, because I'm too worried about saving those guys, helping those guys take back control of their own life and liberate themselves from all the pressures.
Dude, these are such good answers, because you and I, we basically live by the same philosophy. I had all the same doubts. Why me? I was a mediocre soldier, largely. If I had unlocked the things that I've unlocked to this day, I would have been a much better soldier. I know that, right? But you said earlier in the conversation, right? Like, who we were then doesn't define who we are now. And I'm in a much better place to step up and do the work that I've chosen to do to help veterans transition better, to do the nonprofit stuff. And instead of why me, it's like, well, if not me, then who? Right?
Yes, that's it. If not us, then who?
And I love you kind of like, we have the same catchphrase, if you will. It's get out of your own way, because that's the biggest lesson I've learned over the last year, is that I was the one holding myself back from everything that I wanted. Everything that I wanted, I was standing in my own way. And so I use that routinely. Get out of your own fucking way. Just get out of your own way, because you are holding yourself up. It's nobody else. Take accountability for it, sit with it, and do the hard work to get past it. And so that leads us to the next question. And you talk about authentic masculinity. So what is authentic masculinity, in obviously in your words and the way that you view it? And why is it so important to really kind of put that label on it and show men what that means?
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about identity. This is how you get there, guys. So it's 4 pillars of authentic manhood: king, warrior, mentor, and lover. And they all have to be equal. If you think of like the Greek, kind of Parthenon looking structure, the pillars have to be the same length, right? Otherwise that roof is going to fall. So in that same way, we need to build ourselves as men. So king, you are designed for leadership. At a minimum, you will lead yourself and your family. Maybe you're not a leader in business. Maybe you're not a leader in the military. That's fine. But you still have the propensity to be a leader or have a leadership mentality to every situation you inject yourself into. And to that point of like, you're the lowest man on the totem pole. So you're just going to shut up and not make any positive suggestions? Or are you going to be active and be like, hey boss, what about this, this, and this? Dude, that's brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Be a team player. That's a form of leadership called bottom up refinement. But men are built for it. We're like trucks. You're better with a little weight in the back. We need some of that pressure to force us to be better. And it's a service. When we provide good leadership to others, we bless them. It makes their lives better. Everyone wants to work for a great leader. No one argues this. We accept it in every situation in life, especially in the military. Like the guys who are great leaders probably embody all four of these pillars I'm about to go through. The warrior pillar, it's not just physical fitness. You should be physically fit. You should be physically dangerous. You should have the capacity to be violent when it's required to protect the innocent. But where are most of the threats today? It's mental, it's digital, it's all these nefarious ways that are polluting ourselves, polluting our families. And my question to men is, where were the men for the last 50 years just letting this cancer in our society grow? Where were the men standing up saying like, enough's enough? So that's the warrior pillar. It's not just the physical defense, it's the defense of our ideals and beliefs. And you can disagree with me. I want you to stand for your beliefs. The next one is mentor. Men we love to learn things, to gain skills. It makes us feel great, but we also have a great way of paying it forward to others. And that is just as fulfilling or more fulfilling than when we gain skills ourselves or when we accomplish something ourselves. There is a beauty in the masculine nature to want to draw out of others their fullest potential. And that is, again, great leadership, is making others reach their full potential. And so when we lean into that pillar, whether it's family or business or sports or whatever, you're being a complete man. And then the final pillar, it has to be equal to the other ones, but it actually acts like a catalyst that makes you better at all the other ones anyway. And it's the lover pillar. So often we don't equate things like empathy, emotional regulation, or compassion and understanding as masculine traits. But I'm here to tell you that's bullshit. It's an absolute lie that men should not be stoic, emotionally intelligent, attuned to like their wives' emotions, be very understanding. And we are emotional creatures. We just do it differently than women, but it doesn't mean you have none. And most guys today have conditioned themselves to think, I just have none. If I'm a man, I'll just knuckle down and be tough. Okay, until it breaks you, until you crack from all the pressure. And where this also comes into play is you need brotherhood. You can't just do it on your own. So those are the four pillars of authentic masculinity. And when you embrace these things truly in every aspect of your life, it doesn't really matter how much money you make or whatever, all this kind of stuff. You will feel good because you're actually living truly with an identity now that is your own. It's not the things you do. Because you are this man, then you do these things, right? Because you are this man, even if you're not the leader at work, you're going to make suggestions and recommendations to your boss, a trusted advisor. Like, that is a complete man. And that's, if you think right now, like the guys that you really look up to in your life, whether you know them personally or not, they probably embody these four pillars across the board, right? They're not raging all the time or whatever. There's a stoicism to them, but they're also very generous with their time. They want to help others. They are real men. And that's a very attractive presence that we all want to be around. And so you can actually start building that within you.
Dude, I love that, man, because for me, the pillar that I was missing was the lover pillar. I was awful with that. No empathy, no compassion, no desire to try and understand how other people were feeling. You can't relate to me. You're having a bad day. None of that. So I love that. And it sounds a lot of this is rooted in your religion, right? Like a lot of that sounds like it's kind of straight out of the Bible, particularly with the leadership pillar, the king pillar, because at a minimum, you're going to lead your family. I believe the Bible says something about that's what your role as a man is to be.
You're called to be the head of your household. Yes.
Yeah.
And so this is, I'm sure this is where you're going with this. This is like, obviously very contested in our society today, but let me just break that one apart real quick from a non-religious point of view. Okay. So even if you are not a Christian or whatever, you're, atheist or whatever you want to say, let's just logically kind of break down this argument. In every structure in society, we accept when a great man is leading and taking responsibility, owning the outcomes and not passing blame, that it's a good thing, right? Oh, he's a great CEO. He's a great company commander. He's a great non-commissioned officer, right? It's accepted across the board. No one calls that toxic until it goes to marriage. And then, oh, now, the man's going to lead. He's going to take responsibility for his family. Well, I'm a big boss, babe. I don't need his help. You're misunderstanding. Here's the structure. And it's very similar to the military, right? A company commander has an executive officer. So the husband is ultimately responsible for everything his family does or fails to do, period. And so men, this is where the responsibility piece comes in. You don't get to pass the buck. If your wife did something and you're not happy about it, you don't get to just play the blame game and do nothing to own the outcomes. You actually get to change the outcomes. There's 3 legs of leadership. Like a stool, if one is gone, it collapses. It's authority, responsibility, and compassion. So you have the authority to actually change the outcomes. You have responsibility. You own the outcomes. And compassion is your people know that you love them, or you love them a lot, and they know it. Okay. So that lens filters everything we do. But when you're truly leading your family, it doesn't mean you're a tyrant just giving orders. Because just like in the military, a great commander asks his trusted advisors, I need courses of action. What do you recommend? You're the one who's the expert on this. So in the same way, that's how you should be leading with your wife. It's a command team, not a tyrant. And you're going to take all of her suggestions, all of her goodness. And in many cases, she's probably better than you at many things. Hey, babe, what do you think we should do here? I know that you are really capable. I love that. Thank you, baby. Let's do that. We're going to do that. So you make the final decision so that she gets to be free of the consequences, essentially. And when you bear that weight, even very modern, people, it builds attraction because she's still a woman. And deep down, this is how she feels safe. It's about these primal things that are true in us, regardless of what your religion is. This is just how men and women are. The way she actually gets attracted to you is not necessarily how physically fit you are or all these things or how much money you make. They're factors. But the biggest one is if she feels safe, covered, emotionally protected. And the way that she does that is when you're truly leading and actually owning responsibility and not just passing the buck and blaming her, she will start to feel a lot more safe, and it raises the attraction in your marriage. So I hope that kind of breaks down very quickly how this isn't a religious thing. If you just look objectively, look across how many couples are unhappy today, I'm going to point to the man and say he's probably not leading. And the reason I harp on this so heavily is men are initiators. We make the first moves. If you're not happy about the situation in your marriage, it's on you to make the move. It's the exception to the rule that a woman is going to be the one who grows first because they are responsive creatures. And this isn't a derogatory way of describing women. It's actually their superpower because this is how they enhance things that men can never do. If we are leading well and we provide them a home, for example, or a house, they turn it into a home. They magnify and beautify everything they go to, provided they are covered to operate within that safety. And so that's where real men need to rise up again, because it's not just hurting men and causing us to feel all, stressed out all the time. It's also hurting women. And the problems we have in society today aren't from toxic masculinity. It's from a lack of authentic masculinity.
I love it, man. Dude, you give me chills with your answers because it's so well explained, and just in a logical way that I think everybody can understand. Like, how do you refute this? You know what I mean? Like, there's really no way to refute that. We know that we're biologically wired in these ways. That's proven. We can prove that. And so it's just awesome to hear you speak about this. You worked in the forge with a pretty cool guy, huh?
Yeah, I still do.
What did you learn from Mr. Lavery?
Yeah. So Nick Lavery and I met. I had him as a guest on the podcast, and afterwards, I think we just really hit it off. And so he invited me to teach these types of things to his community in the Forge. So I'm a subject matter expert there, but I've learned a lot from him. And I think the biggest takeaway I had from him was while we were recording in the studio, he talked about emotional regulation, right? And so I had asked something to the effect of, what's like the real important takeaway or something like that men need to take, not just soldiers, but all men. And he was describing in the context of like special operations, the way that they evaluate top performers and just average guys is not your shot group. It's not how fast you are, how strong you are. It's how much emotional regulation you have. And in that moment, it like pierced me to my core of like, oh shit, George needed that one. That one was for me. because I realized how little I was actually having emotional regulation in my home, how much I was bursting out of anger or frustration. And if it's that important for special operations, how much more important should it be in our day-to-day relationships to have emotional regulation? And I realize, and this is the hard to swallow pill that most guys need to have and choke down, is the likelihood that your family is going to get hurt from physical harm is probably zero, very, very low in the modern world. The likelihood of them being hurt by your anger, outbursts of anger or rage, very high. You are the most dangerous thing in your own home. And until you get control of that, nothing in your life will change. Your family will not get improved. Your relationship will not go from a dead bedroom to on fire until your emotional regulation is the norm. And so that is the thing I took away from him instantly. And the more and more that I've worked with him and learned from him and just kind of seeing how it plays out in other people's lives, I cannot recommend enough how important it is to have a stoic mindset as a man, like especially in the world we live in today of outrage and shit posting online and all that kind of stuff. Real men aren't doing that. Like real men don't have time for that kind of nonsense. That's what like little kids do. You need to be able to feel your emotions, take control of them, and then respond, not react. And as I've leaned into that heavily and been very brutal with myself of like, ooh, you dropped the ball there, fix that. My marriage has gotten stronger. My ability to parent my daughter is better. My friendships are stronger. My ability to speak with men like you is just that much higher now. And I just think it's the foundation for being a successful man today at whatever you aspire to do.
Dude, I 100% agree with that because I've been working really hard on that the last year in my own home, right? Because I did have a propensity to react, not respond. Not to the level, that it was at one point, but it's like we talked about earlier. It's a journey. It's a work in progress. It's something that I always work on, right? And like one of my big ones now is road rage. For whatever reason, road rage gets me all the time. And I really do out loud with my wife in the car. I'll have an outburst like, "You're a fucking idiot. What are you fucking doing? Learn how to drive." And it's like, wait a second, Adam, you can't do this. That's a reaction, not a response. You know what I mean? And how does that serve me? Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. All it does is makes her uncomfortable. It scares her, right? Because I flip the
lower
switch
her attraction for you. Because what happens in the female mind then is, oh, well, when is he going to do that to me? If he does it to this total stranger, when's it going to happen to me? And it's just we start entering thoughts in our wives' heads that we don't want to be there. It creates a wedge between us, even if it wasn't necessarily directed at her. Women are highly perceptive. They pick up everything on the emotional sense. It's their superpower. All right. So we have to be very aware of that. And that's where a man who's emotionally regulated constantly probably has a wife who's very attracted to him, whatever other flaws he may have, because she just knows that she will be safe with him pretty much always. And the more that I've developed that, I'm not perfect. I lose my temper still. I make amends quickly. But the better I've gotten at it, it has produced more results in my marriage than pretty much anything else. I really do believe it's probably the most important factor men need to grow in fastest.
I'll
for
say
their
for
own
me,
sake and for their families.
Yeah, I'll say for me, it's mind blowing when I started actually working on that and paying attention to it and like doing something about it, how much everything started to change. The relationships better, the like you said, the bedroom's on fire again. Like everything just gets better. The quality of the time that you spend with them gets better, right? Like you don't. There's no awkward silences. There's no wondering what you're going to talk to your spouse about or anything. It just naturally starts to come as you work on that emotional regulation. And it applies to every facet of your life, not just your relationship with your spouse or your significant other, but your relationships with, your friends, your coworkers, your business partners, like everything. Man, I love
people
it.
know, like, this is a man who can be relied upon.
Right.
You know what I mean? You may not be the best at anything, but if they know that you're just going to keep your stuff together, you're dependable. And people want consistency. They want safety. They want someone who's dependable. That's almost always number one. Then it's like the other factors matter. But like, this is why, people who are really effective, maybe in business, they get a lot done. They make a lot of sales, or in the military, they're a good leader because they like get a lot done, but they're toxic on the inside and they're just raging. And you never know, like, you're walking on eggshells. They're not actually a good leader. And most people hate being in those types of environments. And you can see it on their faces pretty quickly. Like if you just observe a unit or observe a company, you can see what type of leader they have. based off of kind of those nonverbal communications and their facial expressions, the way they carry their shoulders and stuff. A stoic, emotionally regulated leader is nothing but a good thing. It's impossible to twist that into that being toxic. So if you do those things, people can say whatever they want, but you're still doing the right thing.
I love it, man. Dude, how can people find you online? Where do you do most of your building at over there to get an audience? And if they wanted to work with you in coaching with Elite Sentinel Coaching, how can they find you?
Yeah, so the website is theelitesentinel.com. That's got the most information about the program and kind of how we teach men. Me personally, I'm on Instagram. It's just george.hayworth. Elite Sentinel Coaching is at elite_sentinel, I think, on Instagram. You can check out the Present Fathers podcast. That's obviously where we do a lot of this kind of conversation, more from the fatherhood perspective, but a lot of manhood stuff. I'm on LinkedIn too. I post a lot there. And then I'm on X. I post a lot on X, kind of like threads, teaching you kind of these lessons. At Elite Sentinel X is there on that one. So I'll make sure you get all the links for me. But really, look, guys, wherever you are in life, if you're struggling or you're kind of just like, man, I feel like I'm on the peak of getting somewhere else, but I just can't quite make it, like, I can help you. I'm also working on a limited capacity with one-on-one guys. So maybe you're like a CEO of a company or a pretty high up senior leader and you just struggle with actual leadership training. I'm your guy for that too. But really, my whole mission is to just empower men to feel capable again, to lead at every level that they are called to. So if it's just within your family, I got you there. If it's in business or military or whatever, we can have that conversation too. I'm pretty well qualified to like help you be your best on that stuff. So hopefully that answers your question of where to find me and how to work with me. If you're kind of on the fence about it, just send me a DM on any platform and I'll send you more information, and we can set up like a quick, kind of 30-minute call just to see if we'd be a good fit for each other.
I love it, man. Dude, what's the one thing you want the audience to take away from our conversation today? It's
time for action, men. We can sit around and point fingers and try and play the blame game, but the only way men heal, so again, whatever stage of life you're in, the only way that your life will get better is your action. It's on no one else. No one's coming to save you. It's on you. A guy like me can help you. I will guide you. I'll show you where to start taking action, but you have to do it. No one else is going to do it for you. It's your responsibility to yourself and to others to take action and stop making excuses. The men who are winning at life, in business, in family, in whatever thing they do, they take constant action. They fail a lot. They learn quickly, and they never make excuses. And I know that may not feel good, but the fastest way to feel better is to start taking action. I assure you, most of my clients, after 2 to 3 weeks, they already say, I have my confidence back. So if you're desperate for that, give me a call.
Man, that's awesome, dude, because I feel the same way. I actually look forward to failing. It feels good to know that I'm progressing, and I just associate it with growth. And it
gets exciting. Yeah, you root out dysfunction as it's like a tiny little seed, and you just cut it out before it gets a chance to take root. And it gets addictive because you're like, man, nothing can keep me down now. I just keep winning.
George, thank you so much for your time today and being here to have this conversation with me. This is by far one of my favorite conversations I've had. I think it's really important work that you're doing. I'm glad that you're out there, trying to empower men to take back their power and their responsibility and live lives that we were supposed to be living as men. You know what I mean? And I think you articulate your mission so well so as to kind of navigate the shitty notions of masculinity in society. So I'm super grateful for you. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure we share this, like, rate, review, subscribe, all that good shit. Send it to anybody and everybody. Help me reach the goal of getting this in front of 1 million veterans before I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025. Lofty goal, 19.6 million veterans in America. We can do this for sure. I give you Mr. George Hayworth.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate the opportunity. Leaders are forged. They're not born. Let's build your legacy.
Yes, sir. We'll see everybody next week. Take care.
That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.